Hello and welcome back to the Three-Handed Bandits channel. It's Nathan back with another video for you today. Today unveiling the 9th team in our 2023-2024 preseason power rankings. Today we're talking about the number 9 Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are a team that every single season they've been in the league has had Super Bowl expectations, and in a weaker NFC this year is none the different. Now, before we talk about their roster, their offseason, their coaching, and what their schedule is going to be looking like, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We got a lot of content coming out to you in the next couple of days, so please come stick around, see every single team and where they stack up in our power rankings. All right, so yeah, as I said, obviously I'm talking about the Dallas Cowboys, probably the most hated team in NFL history, I'm pretty sure. This is a team that does have a lot of expectations, and they also have a lot of roster talent. It's going to be up to Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott to really step up and be the reason that this team can compete and win a Super Bowl. We'll see if that happens or not. Based off my ranking, you can imagine. I don't think it will. But let's go ahead and talk about their offseason before we get into that. So when we talk about their offseason, they had a good offseason. I will say the worst thing that happened this offseason was they blamed Kellen Moore for everything that's gone wrong, scapegoated him, fired him, and then promoted Brian Schottenheimer to their offensive coordinator. So they decided to stay loyal to Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer instead of the young, exciting offensive mind. I think that's going to come back to bite this team in the ass. But besides that, the players that they brought in was a pretty decent offseason. They take a flyer on Trey Lance. Why not for like a 4th or 5th round pick? Just get him in the building. Maybe figures it out. Maybe he doesn't. It doesn't really cost you much. So that was kind of a no doubt. The running back position, they lost Zeke, so they bring in Ronald Jones, who's going to be suspended to start off the year, and Deuce Vaughn, who has all the potential to be Darren Sproles. They lose Dalton Schultz, but that was a loss that they were ready for, as they drafted Jake Ferguson. And then this year they bring in Luke Schoonmaker just to give him another tight end option. And so they lose Noah Brown, who was probably the best wide receiver 4 in the league for a little bit there. But they bring in Brandon Cooks and Jalen Brooks. So I think they're going to be okay losing him. On the offensive line, they lose Connor McGovern and Jason Peters, who have been plus starters throughout their career. And they bring in Asim Richards and Chuma Doga. Just trying to get some more depth on that offensive line. The defense, though, they didn't really lose much. They lose Carlos Watkins on the interior. Anthony Barr has been a low-level linebacker. Their 3rd round pick, DeMarvion Overshone, is going to be on IR and miss the year. Then they lose Anthony Brown as a cornerback, who is a decent corner here. But they bring in Mozzie Smith, who should be a really good interior presence right off rip. Vilimi Fehoko, who may not get on the field a whole lot right away, but could eventually grow into a plus starter. They bring in Stephon Gilmore, who is only a couple years separated from being Defensive Player of the Year, and is still an excellent corner, as well as bringing in Eric Scott. So overall, they had a plus offseason on the player personnel side. However, coaching is a very important part of football, and I'm just a little bit worried that losing Kellen Moore and staying loyal to Mike McCarthy going to hurt this team. Now, as we talk about the coaching, I want to also mention Jerry Jones, who's obviously the owner of this team, still very involved in the decision-making day-to-day basis. I think a lot of Cowboys fans blame Jerry Jones for a lot of their struggles and think he's the reason that they haven't been able to actually get over the hump and win the Super Bowl. Now, while I think he isn't free from blame, I don't think people give Jerry Jones enough credit for the roster building and the drafting that he's done. The Cowboys have been an excellently drafted team forever. They've always drafted very well. Issue with Jerry Jones, I believe, is the loyalty to mediocrity at the coaching position. They had Wade Phillips here, and he was okay. They let him go. They had Jason Garrett for several years, who didn't really do much. Then they get rid of him. Now they have Mike McFraudi, who, the fact that he was able to get a coaching job after the Packers and have to go be an OC or something somewhere, to me is kind of ridiculous. What Mike McCarthy did in Green Bay, he ruined really good teams. The fact that Aaron Rodgers only has 1 Super Bowl ring is kind of embarrassing. The fact he only made 1 Super Bowl is kind of embarrassing. I just don't think Mike McCarthy is a good coach. He hasn't modernized his scheme. And the fact that he's now going to be the play caller, I think is going to be really scary, because those Packers offenses under Aaron Rodgers were only good because of Aaron Rodgers. So I'm just really worried about how this offense is going to look. I just don't expect it to be very good. And having Brian Schottenheimer as your offensive coordinator, he's not some young, exciting mind. He's also one of these like traditional, old school type of coaches. So I don't expect that, it's going to be a super creative, super, explosive offense. I think it's going to be very traditional, very old school, and it's going to, limit this team. They do still have a lot of talent, and, talent can overcome some of that. But when it comes to playoff time, do we expect Mike McCarthy to call up the right play or have the right game plan? Take out, like the Eagles or the 49ers or whoever comes out of the AFC in the Super Bowl? To me, I just don't see it. I don't think Mike McCarthy's a good coach. The fact that he still has a job here is ridiculous. So while they're going to have some of the worst offensive coaching in the league, somehow they're also going to have like some of the best defensive coaching, Dan Quinn. So Dan Quinn obviously is part of that Seattle team, Super Bowl era teams, and came over to Atlanta, and his defenses didn't quite translate. And they had Kyle Shanahan, and they made a Super Bowl because he had great offensive, coaching. Then Shanahan left, and that Falcons team really kind of started to fall apart. But the Falcons players fought really hard for him, but eventually they let him go. He finds his way over to Dallas and takes a look at himself, looks himself in the mirror, and completely reworks and revamps his defense. And now he's one of the best kind of defensive minds in the league. And not only is that, I think every player just loves Dan Quinn. So to me, I think it's a very, very possible situation that at some point Mike McCarthy gets fired and Dan Quinn, at the very least, I imagine will be the interim head coach. I don't know if he ever wants to go back to being a head coach, but Dan Quinn being the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, to me, wouldn't be the most shocking thing. Players love him. His defense is insane, and not sing his praises anymore. Dan Quinn and kind of the career turnaround he had from his time in Atlanta, I think is insane. Because, they're going to do a little bit of everything. They're multiple front. They're not quite just, relying on, cover three like the Seattle three. Really mixes in coverages, he mixes up his fronts, gets really aggressive, gets after the quarterback, and that's how you win in the modern NFL. And so to me, it's going to be interesting to see how much this defense can overcome some of the offense's, poor play or, stagnant, or how stagnant it could be at times. But, if I had to bet on who's the next head coach for the Dallas Cowboys, I would put money on Dan Quinn. I think he's excellent, and if it weren't for Dan Quinn, I don't know if this team would even be a top 6. Well, they have the talent to be a top 16. I'm being ridiculous, but if it wasn't for Dan Quinn, I'd be very worried about this team. So now let's go ahead and transition to the roster, though, and we'll start off with Dak Prescott. So Dak is one of the most hated quarterbacks in the league, but I still do think that people don't properly rate him. I think there's a lot of people, a lot of Cowboys fans who are going to tell you he's an elite quarterback and like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he's not. But there's also a lot of people who think he's like a bad quarterback for whatever reason, which also isn't true. He's like the 10th-ish best quarterback in the league, like anywhere from like 8 to 11. He has good physical tools. He has decent arm strength. His accuracy is pretty good. Sometimes it's a little inconsistent. Sometimes he'll, miss simple throws, but he has good athleticism. His main issue is he's super inconsistent playing out of structure. Because when the structure of the offense is there, he can play really well and let his receivers, make plays. And, he's not scared to throw that 50-50 jump ball to Michael Gallup or, give his wide receivers a chance to make a play. Issue with Dak is sometimes he leaves a lot to be desired. When the play breaks down, it's 3rd and 8. Need this crucial first down. Sometimes he just goes away. Sometimes he's really inconsistent. Sometimes he can step up, run around, find the man on the move. Sometimes the pressure gets to him and he freaks out and he'll throw a bad play or a bad pick. But he has good decision making, good processing for the most part. It's just a true inconsistency to make the big plays like a Mahomes or Josh Allen. And I don't think, he's ever going to get there at that point. He is older. He started a lot of games in the league, but he's still a good quarterback. He's, probably like exactly like the 10th-ish best quarterback in the league. He's kind of right at the top of that kind of tier 3 of good quarterbacks, but not, I don't think he's threatening to be elite. Is he a good enough quarterback to win a Super Bowl with? Yes, he's a good enough quarterback to win a Super Bowl with. I just think you need everything to kind of go right. I think you need a really good, offensive play caller, and I just don't know that they have that here. So I don't think this Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott quarterback coach duo is ever going to be good enough to win a Super Bowl. But if Dak Prescott was, let's say, a San Francisco 49er with Kyle Shanahan, then I think it would be very easy for Dak to be a Super Bowl quarterback. You know what I mean? So I just think that Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott as a duo is not very good. But let's say come next year, Mike McCarthy sucks, they fire him, Dan Quinn's the head coach, and they bring in some sort of exciting offensive mind. Let's just say Shane Waldron off the top of my head from Seattle. Then I think there's a legit chance that could be a Super Bowl caliber coach and quarterback duo. But as of this year, with Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy as your offensive minds, I think it's not going to be a Super Bowl team. And then behind him, you have Cooper Rush and Trey Lance. I don't really believe in Trey Lance at this point. Shanahan was so ready to move on from him. They clearly didn't like him. So he probably just can't play or can't figure it out. Athletically, though, he has a lot of tools. And so taking a flyer on him, why not? Worst case, a 4th or 5th round, whatever it was, 4th or 5th round pick to take a shot on someone with the physical upside who can maybe give you an elite quarterback one day. Might as well take the shot. I don't imagine we'll ever really see him play, because if Dak does end up going down, Cooper Rush will come in, just be a very adequate starter, almost like a Case Keenum can just come in, make enough plays to win a game, but is not, a physically talented quarterback. But now as we talk about the passing offense, the receiving weapons they have, they do have a pretty talented group. And that's going to start off with CeeDee Lamb, who I think is primed to hopefully take some steps up to, be considered in the tier 1 of wide receivers. I think right now he's kind of in the tier 2, kind of with AJ Brown. I think Garrett Wilson's going to be in that tier this year, of not quite competing to be the best wide receiver in the league, but still one of the best wide receivers in the league. Last year was uber productive, has a good connection with Dak, can line up anywhere, can win all levels, has good speed, it's good with the ball after the catch. And so CeeDee Lamb's just a complete player, and I think is going to be able to help take a stride to be considered a top 5-ish wide receiver. Behind him, you have two pretty good outside receivers in Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup. Brandon Cooks just finds a way to have 1,000-yard seasons. Is a really good player. I think over the span of his entire career has been underrated. But at this point, as he's getting older and slowing down, I think he's just a fine wide receiver. Now, I think I'd rather have Amari Cooper than Brandon Cooks, obviously, who they traded away a year or two ago. Brandon Cooks is still going to come in, give you solid production, and give you a solid second option. And then Michael Gallup, as your third, has been a good player when he's been out there. And Dak really trusts him and jump balls and is not going to be afraid to throw it to him down the sideline. He's made some really insane plays. And overall, he's just a very fine, adequate wide receiver. So you're 3 deep at wide receiver. The depth isn't amazing. Kevontae Turpin is just a return man, so we're not really expecting anything from him in the receiving game. And then you got 2 young guys, Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Brooks. Jalen Tolbert was a guy who kind of had some hype towards the end of the training camp last year, but he never really got in the field or never really did much. And then Jalen Brooks was a 5th round pick, I want to say off the top of my head. They have some decent athleticism, and they could come in and maybe be okay for you, but they're your 4th and 5th guys. They're not really going to be on the field unless you have an injury or 2. But the depth, that's not anything spectacular. And then we talk about the tight ends and running backs. Tony Pollard, I think, is destined to have a insane year unless he does go down. Last year, I do think Ezekiel Elliott is an underrated running back. I do think a lot of people think he's just horrible. I think Ezekiel Elliott was still a good running back, despite what a lot of people want to tell you. That's part of the reason that he ate into the production of Tony Pollard, is because he was still serviceable. But having a full year of just Tony Pollard, not a whole lot of competition. I imagine Tony Pollard could be in store for a very, very excellent year. Super, super explosive. It's going to be a good receiving weapon for this team, and might really take the step forward to be a top 10 running back in this league this year. We also got Deuce Vaughn, all at 5'6", 180. He's shades of Darren Sproles. Got really insane, feet. He's never going to be a great runner. Maybe won't be a great, pass protector just because he is so small. But I imagine he can give you, a lot of what Darren Sproles did as a good receiving option out of the backfield. He's so quick, so shifty, so elusive because he is so small. It's hard to get your hands on him. But if you do get your hands on him, he's going down. The tight end room isn't great. They drafted Jake Ferguson, who You look at his combine and physicals, is nearly identical to Dalton Schultz, and he plays very similar to him. Is just a decent chain mover who, Dallas Cowboys love their chain moving tight ends like Jason Witten. Run 10 yards, give the ball, and he's good at kind of sensing where the, closing down defender is and bouncing off that to get a couple extra yards. So he's fine. He's an adequate starter. Not a crazy blocker or anything, but he's an adequate starter. I think that's part of the reason why they were okay with moving on from Dalton Schultz. The depth here isn't great, though. So they draft Lou Schoonmaker in the second round. He's got good speed and could come in and be an okay kind of receiving option right off rip. Usually these rookie tight ends aren't amazing. But he can come in, be a solid player. I don't think he'll ever be a great blocker or anything. I think Greg Zuerlein compared him to Dawson Knox. So I imagine he can be that kind of tier caliber of just a decent receiving weapon that's got good speed. And then Peyton Hendershot, just slow, not super athletic. Third tight end, I guess he could do worse. He's just a very okay player, I guess. And then I also got Rico Dowdle as another running back option here, who's been in the league for a while and has never really gotten on the field. So I'm not really expecting much from him. But overall, I do think that this receiving game is going to be a pretty good unit. I think they're going to be able to move the ball pretty well. I just wish that they had a more modern mind to really get the best out of this unit, because I feel like, they're going to be somewhat limited by the offensive coaching and play calling, but they do have a lot of talent here. And with a good enough quarterback, they could have a really productive offense. So when we talk about the running backs as runners, obviously Tony Pollard is in store for a big year, if he stays healthy. He's got really great speed, is super explosive, has good vision, and with how good of an offensive line that they do have, and we'll get to in a second, could be in store for, if you give him a well-blocked run, he's gone. He has the speed to, really hit home runs. Behind them, though, I don't think Deuce Vaughn's going to be a very good runner. As I said, 5'6", like 180. If you get your hands on him, he's probably going down, but, shifty, he's got good speed. And then Rico Dowdle, as I said, has been in the league for a couple years now. He's never really gotten on the field. Don't really expect much from him. It's really just Tony Pollard's backfield. So if he stays healthy, it's going to be a pretty good running game. And so part of the reason it's going to be a good running game and a good passing game is because they do have a good offensive line. We'll start off with Zach Martin, best guard in the league still probably. Will probably end up being a Hall of Famer just because he's been one of the best offensive players in the league for at least half a decade now. He's a stud. Not much needs to be said about him. The other four guys, though, we could have a little bit of dialogue. Tyron Smith at one point, him and Trent Williams were 1A and 1B, the left tackle. He's just elite, just lockdown lineman. And unfortunately, Tyron Smith has suffered from injuries a lot more than Trent Williams has, and so he's losing a step. You can clearly see his athleticism is not quite what it used to be, but technically, he's still one of the best tackles in the league. He's very refined and still has some old man strength. So he's still going to be a plus player, still going to be able to, run block at a, higher level, and still going to be a pretty locked down pass protector. But there is times that he's going to get beat. He's just not quite the athlete that he used to be, but he's still a serviceable, still a good offensive lineman. Tyler Smith, they drafted him as a tackle, and they ended up kicking him into guard just, while Tyron Smith is still here. He's a guy that's coming out of Tulsa that was pretty raw and just needed some better coaching because he's got really great athletic traits. So as long as, he stays healthy, I think he's going to be in store for another really good year. And then at whatever point that Tyron Smith inevitably does go down, that's going to be interesting to kind of see what they do. Are they going to kick Tyler Smith out to left tackle where they drafted him? Are they going to start Chuma Doga or Asim Richards? Are they going to kick either Chuma Doga or Asim Richards in guard? It's going to be interesting to kind of see what they do there. Tyler Smith is a really good run blocker and is still growing as a pass protector, but does have, good athleticism to be a really, really good tackle. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do when Tyron Smith does go down. They were flirting around with Asim Richards in the preseason. He was playing left tackle and guard. They're trying to see what he could do. Then Chuma Doga's been a tackle, but last year in Atlanta, only had played one game, but as a guard, but graded out pretty well on PFF. So maybe when Tyron Smith goes down, they kick Tyler Smith out to left tackle, and Chuma Doga becomes their guard as just a very adequate low-level starter. It'll be interesting to see what they end up doing there. Tyler Biadasz as their center. I think people were expecting more from him. They did draft him with some high draft capital, and he's been, adequate. He's been all right, not anything crazy. It's a contract year, so maybe he does have a contract year breakout, but at the very least, he's an adequate starter. And as your weakest link, having an adequate center, it's not really the end of the world. And then Terrence Steele was an undrafted guy that came in, has balled out, just got a big extension that makes him like the 10th-ish or like the 9th highest paid, right tackle in the league. So good for him. I think they were hesitant to pay him, but they finally decided that they were going to. And he's a good tackle. He's got the willingness and decent athleticism to be a good run blocker. He just does struggle on pass protection a little bit, so there is some weeks where it'll be a little bit of a turnstile. But for the most part, he's going to move people off the ball, and he'll hold up pretty well in pass blocking for the most part. Sometimes he's going to struggle a little bit. But overall, it's a pretty good unit that I think is really going to be able to maul people and move people out of the way and be an excellent run blocking unit for Tony Pollard. Pass pro, they're going to be good, but they do, they're adequate at it. Zach Martin's great. The other guys are all pretty decent at it. So they don't have any true weaknesses on this offensive line. Unless Tyron Smith goes down, it's going to be interesting what kind of happens in the guard tackle spot. But overall, it's going to be a pretty good unit, and it's really going to help this offense. So overall, I do think this offense does have the potential to truly be a top 10 unit. They have enough weapons. They have a good enough offensive line where they should be. It's going to be on to Dak and this offensive play calling and scheme to really get that out of this roster. But if everything goes right, this is going to be a top 10 offense that's going to be able to move the ball and score a lot of points. So now as we transition to Dan Quinn's defense, this is where all the hype is from. It's going to start off with Micah Parsons, who is either the first, second, or third best edge rusher in the league. Whatever you want to say is fine. But one of the top, 5-ish to 10 defensive players, just overall players in the league in general. I would have thought that coming out as a middle linebacker, he would become one of the best edge players in the league. But he keeps developing. Last year had 90 pressures, and as he keeps learning a position and playing it more, who even knows if his ceiling can still grow some? A terrifying thought. But he's an absolute beast. Not else needs to be said about him. He's just one of the best players in the league. End of sentence. The rest of the offensive line, though, they do have a pretty good unit. Their other edge is going to be DeMarcus Lawrence, who is definitely slowed down from the player that was once, kind of considered a Defensive Player of the Year candidate several years ago. He's just getting a little bit older, but he's still an excellent player. Still rotate in, can still get after the quarterback, and still defend the run at a decent level. But we will see him kind of rotating a lot more to kind of help keep him healthy, because they also do have a pretty good group to rotate in with Dorrance Armstrong, Sam Williams, and Dante Fowler. Dorrance Armstrong is the best run defender out of those three kind of rotational pieces. So I imagine we'll kind of see a lot of him on early downs, and maybe on the have-to-have-it downs, you'll see a lot more DeMarcus Lawrence. Dorrance Armstrong isn't horrible at getting after the quarterback in his own right. A pretty solid player. Sam Williams has so much potential, but also off the field is a bit of an asshat and really needs to get his shit together. But the Cowboys are not scared of taking on these troubled off-field players. And, he's talented. Last year he graded out pretty well as a pass rusher. And, he's 6'4", ran like a 4.5, 4.4. Like, he's an insane athlete. Got good strength. Is learning the position and still has good pass rush moves. And in this Dan Quinn defense that's getting really aggressive and runs a lot of stunts, he's really good for that because he's got insane, acceleration and burst and speed and really good strength to be kind of the looper, the crash man. And so he's a guy that, stock is rising for him and is going to have a good year, I imagine, as he keeps learning a position. Just kind of needs to clean everything up off the field. But if he doesn't, Dante Fowler is just a very adequate veteran, been in the league for a long time now, and we're getting from him just a decent pass rusher, but not really defending the run at all. So overall, you have a pretty good pass rush coming from the edge. The interior, you do have a pretty good unit. And so in the interior, we'll start with Mozzie Smith. So they draft him out of Michigan. Just be a big old fat boy and stop the run. And I imagine he's going to come in right away and be that. He's all of, like 340 pounds, got really good strength, has good technique to be a really good nose tackle. And I imagine, he'll develop and to be, in the top tier of, nose tackle, similar like a DJ Reed or Vita Vea, like to really get up to that level of player. And very limited snaps last year. There was times where I was able to get after the quarterback and really tee off, and he wasn't horrible at it. So he does have a decent pass rushing upside. I know he's never going to be Chris Jones or Aaron Donald, but could at least be a very adequate pass rusher. And so I do think that stock is up for him. And the one thing this crazy defensive line was missing was just a big old fat boy. Like, I think that's an underrated aspect of defense, is having a strong interior presence that can really stop the run. And that's the last thing this defensive line was missing. So him coming in, I think, is going to be a huge addition. And then Osa Odigizua isn't a great run defender. He's undersized. 6'2", 280. He's just an undersized interior. But that is why they drafted him. One of these undersized interior guys with really great get off. He's got really good pad level to come in and get after the quarterback. And we've seen him do that. He's came in and been a plus pass rusher from the inside. And for being undersized, he's held up pretty okay as an interior defender. He had a couple games where he had graded out really poorly, but for the most part, he's at least adequate for an undersized guy. And so with that, starting 4, you have a good unit that's going to be able to stop the run and get after the quarterback very well. But then the interior pieces you have as depth, Jonathan Hankins, who's just a very adequate, similar to, Mozzie Smith, but with no pass rushing upside, just a good nose tackle. And then you got Neville Gallimore and Chauncey Golston, both who can kind of rotate in. I don't think Neville Gallimore is very good, but they keep him here, so I think they trust him. But Chauncey Golston can come in, get after the quarterback, and run defend at a decent level. So overall, you're going to have one of the best pass rushers in the league. Granted, if Micah Parsons goes down, it's going to hurt a lot. But you're going to have one of the best pass rushers in the league, and you're going to have a unit that's going to be able to defend the run at a pretty good level for the most part. Micah Parsons isn't a perfect, run defender, but he's good at it. But, when he's getting after the quarterback at an elite level, you're not too worried about that. So overall, going to have one of the best defensive lines in the entire league, and hopefully Mozzie Smith will help give them a better edge as a run defense unit. The linebacking group, Leighton Vander Esch has been here for a couple of years, and when he first kind of came into the league, was the guy that did seem to have a good amount of upside, but a couple of injuries have derailed him, and he's kind of just developed and been a fine, adequate starter. Decent athleticism, decent run defender. He's got okay in coverage. Like, he's just a solid player and one of just, an adequate linebacker. Damone Clark, though, is the guy here that has a lot of upside. He's part of those LSU teams, had a lot of talented linebackers, and he's no different. He's a full-size dude, big dude, ran like a 4.5. He's got good speed for the position, a really fast, insane athlete. And it seemed like he wasn't going to get on the field last year. He discovered during one of his medical visits that he had a herniated disc. He played through it, seemed to play fine. So it seemed like he was supposed to miss all of last year, but ends up getting on the field late, or in the second half of the year. And it was a really good starter, and I imagine more time on the field is only going to help. There's a clip of him when he had the herniated disc and was recovering and wasn't medically cleared yet. Still kind of, he's mirroring footwork and doing these little, mirroring these reps while he can compete. So I think overall, he's got really high character, and I imagine Damone Clark could be in store for a really good year and could be a breakout player for this team, and even just break out to be one of the better linebackers in the entire league. I think Damone Clark is going to be a really exciting player and piece for this defense. And I imagine we do see a lot of Jaron Kearse playing in the box, kind of playing as a linebacker, which is a growing trend here in the NFL. As a safety, he's 6'4", full-size dude. He's not scared to come up and, play the run and hit somebody, but is a little bit of a better coverage player than these two guys off rip. So I imagine, some crucial third downs, we'll kind of see him playing a little bit more as a dime linebacker to kind of help, the pass coverage unit. We also got Devin Harper here, who hasn't really gotten on the field much. Maybe he has some good tools. We'll see if he gets on the field at all. And then obviously DeMarvion Overshone is going to be on IR and miss the year. But overall, it's a good linebacking unit. I think Damone Clark could really take some steps forward. But, we just need to see that happen. But it's not going to, hurt this defense. But they don't have, Fred Warner or anything crazy that's really going to help it. But I imagine, as I said, Damone Clark could break out this year. And the secondary is a polarizing one. Trayvon Diggs is one of the most hated on players in the league. Granted, I think if he was on a team besides Dallas, it probably would not be as much hate for him. He has become a much smarter, secure player. Had that 11 interception year, and a lot of that was some boom or bust, but he has elite ball skills. You can tell that he grew up with the brother who's a wide receiver in the NFL because he has wide receiver ball skills. He's an excellent player, and he's gotten smarter about when he kind of triggers, makes plays. He has great speed and likes to bait the quarterback because he has such great ball skills. But he's gotten better at not getting burned over the top. He is a little bit more boomer bust than, say, Stephon Gilmore next to him. But for the most part, I do still think that Trayvon Diggs is a really great player. And if he was anywhere besides Dallas, I don't think he'd be getting as much hate. And then Stephon Gilmore still play, can still, kind of take people out of plays. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how you're going to attack this defense because throw to Stephon Gilmore, he's going to break up the pass because he's just in lockdown corner. Or we can throw it to Trayvon Diggs' sides, who's probably going to pick us off. A pretty scary duo to go against. It's one of the better, cornerback duos in the league. The Jets are up there, and the Eagles are up there for sure, and they're definitely one of the top 5-ish. I think Trayvon Diggs is still a really excellent player. And then Jordan Lewis as your slot corner is one of the better slot corners in the league. Is a solid player, is okay at defending the run. Is a good coverage player. And so you got 3 solid corners there. Yeah, you got 3 solid corners there. Depth, you got Deron Bland, who's a pretty decent starter. And then Eric Scott, Noah Igbenogany are some younger guys. Noah hasn't really shown much yet. But they take a flyer on him, might as well. I don't know how good Eric Scott is going to be, but he made the team here, so at least he'll be adequate, hopefully. The safety group, Malik Hooker is going to be more the free safety. Don Wilson is going to be more the strong safety. Both are pretty good players in their own right. Malik Hooker, I don't think ever took, huge stripes up to be a really good player like it seemed like he could have been. But you got 2 adequate safeties and Jaron Kearse, who's also a bigger body dude, give me like a dime linebacker and really just come in and stop the run and be a good coverage player when they need him. They got 3 good safeties there. Depth-wise, after those guys, is not very good. But overall, I think you're going to have a really good secondary. And when you have a pass rush and a front 7 that could be as good or will be as good as this Cowboys defense is going to be, it's going to make the secondary's job a lot easier. So just imagine Trayvon Diggs could have another really productive year. I think teams aren't going to want to throw Stephon Gilmore's way because he's still one of the best kind of man-to-man corners in the league and can still take people out of plays. And so I imagine you're going to have to throw to Trayvon Diggs a little bit more. But as I said, it's good at baiting quarterbacks. It's got great ball skills. And when this pass rush is getting after you and you have to speed up your decision-making, I feel like Trayvon Diggs might end up having another really productive year. If I had to bet on somebody to lead the league in interceptions again, I would bet on Trayvon Diggs. So overall, I do think you're going to have one of the best defenses in the league. And hopefully the addition of Mozzie Smith is going to help them be a little bit better as a run defending unit. Obviously, they're getting after the quarterback at a great level like they will last year. But last year, teams could still run at them pretty easily. So I imagine hopefully having Mozzie Smith is going to help this unit. And it's going to be a top 10 unit. As long as if Micah Parsons doesn't go down, it's going to be a top 10. It's going to be a really fun defense to watch, and they're really going to get after it. And so now as we talk about this schedule, Vegas has them second to win the NFC East at plus 175 and has them at 9.5 wins. My projection also has them at 9.5, but I would feel pretty confident taking the over for this team, despite the poor coaching. They play the NFC West, so having to go to Arizona and play the Rams at home, they should win both of those games. I feel pretty confident they will. I imagine they'll be able to sweep Washington this year, so that has them at 4 right there. In games they should win, they should take care of New England at home. They should win the Giants game at home. Should win against Seattle at home. Philly and Detroit should win all those games at home. They have either really good defenses or the offense that would be able to kind of take advantage of those teams. And having to go to Carolina, they should win that one as well. So that right there, I have them at 10 wins. Having to go on the road to the Giants, the Chargers, and the Dolphins, those aren't easy games. I could really kind of see those going either way. So anywhere from like 10 to 13 wins, I think is pretty reasonable for this Cowboys team, kind of despite some of their coaching. Having to go, going against the Jets, the Niners, to Philly and to Buffalo, I think those are tough games. And so I imagine they, might end up dropping those 4. As I said, anywhere from, 10 to 13 wins is very, very plausible. If something does go horribly wrong for this team, though, it's going to be Mike McCarthy, or, a really bad injury. But I feel really good about this team, kind of despite some of that play calling, to be a good team and to make the playoffs. Philadelphia, I haven't unveiled yet, but Philly could be a team that's due for some regression. So the Cowboys to win the NFC East at plus 175, I don't think is a horrible bet to make either. So now as we kind of go and recap everything for you real quick, the offensive coaching is just straight up bad. I think it's going to limit this team. Maybe this year they're able to get away with it, but in the long run, I think it's going to hurt them. But Dak Prescott is a really good quarterback still, and with the receiving weapons and offensive line that they do have, could be a really, really good unit. This pass rush is going to be scary, especially if Micah Parsons stays healthy. I'm going to be terrified. But Sam Williams and some of the other pieces they have definitely have the potential to grow and be even better somehow. And they have a really great secondary as well. As I said, if you got a top 3 cornerback duo in the league, that's pretty good. And so overall, they just have insane roster talent. Despite the coaching, I do think they're going to win a lot of games because they do have a very favorable schedule. They only have 4, kind of tough games. With how much roster talent they have, I think they're going to be able to compete. It's just going to be interesting to see how they found a way to Cowboys it. Like, who are they going to lose to in the divisional round? Is it going to be the Vikings, Seahawks, like the Giants? Like, that would be really funny. So overall, I do think this is a team that has great roster talent, has an insane defense, and is someone I feel pretty good about making the playoffs. Only thing I would be worried about is, will this play calling and will Dak be good enough to win, 2 playoff, maybe 3 playoff games to get to the Super Bowl and then win a third of a 4th game to actually win that Super Bowl? I just don't know if they're going to be good enough to do that. But if this team went 13-4 and was the 1 seed in the NFC, that would not be surprising. As I said, insane roster talent and a good schedule for them. That would not be surprising at all. But as I said, I just don't feel very confident in this team to actually go in, win this Super Bowl. But Cowboys fans or any other fans of these NFC teams, let me know kind of where I'm right about this team, and let me know where I'm wrong. But we'll be back very soon with our 8th ranked team. Please stick around for that. If you stuck around for this point, please like and subscribe, and we'll be back very soon with the next video.